Kaelor had not simply left Zelthor, he had left the constraints of mortality itself, and the universe was about to learn what that truly meant. The portal behind him collapsed, sealing away the war-torn ruins of Zelthor. Kaelor stepped forward, his body no longer bound by flesh, but by something greater. Reality itself twisted around him, shifting and reshaping with his mere presence. He was in a realm beyond understanding, a space between spaces where stars pulsed like beating hearts and gravity bent in unnatural patterns. This was no empty void, it was alive. For the first time since his ascension, Kaelor paused. Something was watching him. Then the whispers began, not words, but raw thoughts pressing against the edges of his mind. Visions of civilizations erased from time, of gods long forgotten, of forces even the Syrr'kai had feared. Kaelor narrowed his glowing eyes. "You sense me, but do you understand me?" The whispers stopped. Then the universe shuddered. Meanwhile, back in known space, Selene Draeven stood aboard the Ebon horizon, staring at the empty void where Zelthor had once burned with battle. The war was over, but the sense of dread in her chest only grew. "He's gone," a lieutenant murmured. "But to where?" Selene exhaled slowly. "That's the real question." Deep within the Varian fleet, whispers of Kaelor's transformation spread like wildfire. Some hailed him as the savior of the Empire, while others feared what he had become. But no one could deny one truth: he was no longer one of them. And if Kaelor was no longer bound by the rules of the mortal universe, then what rules would he choose to create? Power does not exist in a vacuum. When something ascends, something else must awaken to meet it. Kaelor stood at the edge of the impossible. The space around him rippled like water, shifting between forms his mind could barely process. He had left behind the limitations of flesh, of time, of the laws that once bound him. And yet, he was not alone. The silence shattered. A presence, vast, unknowable, unfurled itself before him. It was not a creature, not a machine, not a god. It was something older, something that had existed before stars first ignited, before empires rose and fell. It had no name, only intent, and it was watching him. Kaelor did not flinch. "You recognize me," he said, his voice echoing in this place without air. "You see what I have become." The presence shifted. A storm of thought and memory surged toward him, not as words, but as a crushing wave of understanding. Kaelor clenched his fists as visions flooded his mind. Countless beings across the eons had tried to transcend, to claim the raw power of creation. None had succeeded. None had been allowed to. And then the presence finally spoke. "You are unbound, and that cannot be allowed." Meanwhile, far from this cosmic confrontation, Selene Draeven moved swiftly. The Ebon horizon led the remnants of the coalition fleet through deep space, their goal uncertain. "We need answers," she said, pacing the command deck. "Whatever Kaelor has become, he is no longer just our enemy. He is a threat to everything." The technician hesitated. "Where do we even start?" Selene turned toward the star map, her expression grim. "We find the Syrr'kai ruins. They knew what he was becoming. They feared it. And if they feared it, maybe they left behind a way to stop him. Kaelor has stepped beyond the limits of mortality, but something ancient is watching. What happens when a force that was never meant to exist collides with something far older, something that refuses to be forgotten? Like this video and subscribe to witness the next chapter of this unfolding cosmic war. The battle is far from over. There is a difference between power and control. One is taken, the other is granted, and Kaelor had taken too much. The presence moved, not in space, not in time, but in a way that bent the very concept of movement. It loomed over Kaelor, though it had no form, no eyes, only judgment. "You are a distortion," it said. An anomaly, an error that must be corrected. Kaelor's golden gaze burned. I am not an error. He raised his hand, and the realm around him obeyed. Stars folded inward, time rippled at his command. He was no longer just a conqueror, he was a force, but the presence did not kneel. Instead, the space around Kaelor resisted. Where once he had reshaped existence with a thought, now the universe pushed back. It was as if reality itself was rejecting him. Your kind were never meant to ascend, the presence continued. You take, you break, you consume. That is why. There must always be balance, and you... The void shook. You are imbalance. Kaelor's eyes narrowed. For the first time since his ascension, he felt something unexpected. Pressure. Meanwhile, aboard the Ebon horizon, Selene Draeven's search had led her fleet to a distant, forgotten world. The planet's surface was scarred, its ruins stretching, like skeletal remains beneath a violet sky. The Syrr'kai feared him for a reason, she murmured. We need to know why. The expedition team moved quickly, searching for anything left behind by the ancient energy beings. Then one of the officers froze. Admiral, you need to see this. Selene turned, stepping forward, and there, engraved deep within the ruins, was a warning, a symbol, an ancient inscription, a message left by the Syrr'kai long before Kaelor was even born. It read, "The Devourer will come." The Syrr'kai did not warn of Kaelor's rise. They warned of what he would become. Selene Draeven stared at the inscription, her pulse hammering. The Devourer, a being the Syrr'kai had foreseen long before Kaelor's ascension. What does it mean? An officer asked, his voice tight with unease. Selene exhaled sharply. It means Kaelor isn't the first, and if they left this warning behind, it means we're already too late. Beneath the ruins, the search teams unearthed more relics, fragments of Syrr'kai technology, ancient texts inscribed in glowing energy veins. But among the artifacts, Selene found something that made her blood run cold. A star map. Coordinates, leading to a place beyond known space, a place labeled the First Collapse. Meanwhile, in the void beyond reality, Kaelor gritted his teeth as the presence bore down on him. For the first time, something challenged his will. Something refused to kneel. Balance? He scoffed. You speak of balance as if it is something sacred. He lifted his hand, and the very fabric of space strained against his power. Balance is a lie told by the weak to justify their chains. The presence did not waver. You do not understand. There is no balance without opposition. And for what you have become, an opposition must rise. A deep rumbling filled the void. The darkness itself seemed to unravel, and in the distance, something stirred. Kaelor turned his gaze toward the disturbance, and for the first time, since his ascension, he felt uncertainty. The presence was not his enemy, it was a warning. You are not the first to take what was not meant to be yours, it whispered. And you will not be the last to be unmade. Beyond the rift in space, something was waking up. For every force that rises, another must awaken to meet it. Kaelor was not the first. He would not be the last. But unlike the others, he had been warned. Beyond the rift, something stirred. It was not a being, not a mind. It was an event, a presence that had no name, only hunger. It had felt him. It had felt what he had become, and now it was coming. Kaelor's golden eyes narrowed as the void trembled. The presence that had warned him began to fade, dissolving into the fabric of space itself. You have set the cycle in motion, it whispered. And now the Devourer wakes. Kaelor clenched his fists. I am no pawn in some cosmic balance. He turned his gaze toward the darkness beyond the rift, toward the unseen force that now hunted him. If it comes for me, he said, his voice burning with defiance, then let it learn what it means to challenge a god. Across the galaxy, Selene Draeven's fleet moved swiftly through uncharted space, following the Syrr'kai star map to the location known as the First Collapse. Every record of this place had been erased. No star charts recognized it, no sensors could scan it. And yet, as the fleet drew closer, a single word appeared on the displays, untranslated, unbidden, alien. Wound. Selene gripped the console. As the ships emerged from hyperspace, and the universe itself seemed broken before them, a vast scar in reality stretched across the void, an abyss that pulsed with dead light, as if something had once fed upon this place and left nothing behind. Her heart pounded. "Get me every reading we can," she ordered. "If the Syrr'kai called this the First Collapse, then what the hell happened here?" The answer came immediately. As the scanners activated, the shadows inside the abyss moved. They had not arrived unnoticed. The past is never truly gone. The echoes remain, waiting, and when something stirs the void stirs back. The First Collapse was not just a place, it was a wound, a scar in the very fabric of reality. As Selene Draeven's fleet hovered on the edge of the abyss, its presence pressed against them, an unnatural weight, a silence too deep, as if sound itself had once been devoured here. "Admiral," a technician whispered, their voice barely, more than a breath. "Something is moving." Selene didn't need the scanners to know. She could feel it. Inside the abyss, the darkness was not empty. It swirled, shifted, twisting upon itself like the tide before a storm. Then, from the void, came the first glimpse of something impossible, a structure not built, but grown, vast monoliths of obsidian and shimmering metal. Their surfaces pulsing with veins of violet light rose from the abyss like the bones of a dead god. Selene's fingers curled into fists, magnify visual. The screen flickered, and for a moment the abyss stared back. A shape, vast beyond comprehension, moved within the shadows. It had no single form, its edges blurred, shifting between solid and spectral. It was awake. "That's not a planet," one of the officers muttered. "That's alive." Selene felt her breath catch. The Syrr'kai had left a warning, but not a weapon. They had not prepared for this. And now they had been noticed. "Hostile readings!" A lieutenant's voice cracked with urgency. "Something is locking onto us." Before Selene could react, a pulse of unmaking energy surged from the abyss. It struck the outermost ship in the fleet, the cruiser Verdict of Dawn. There was no explosion, no wreckage. The ship simply ceased. A ripple of terror spread through the bridge. This was not destruction. This was erasure. Selene's voice was sharp. "All ships, prepare for emergency retreat." But before the fleet could react, the thing inside the abyss spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in concepts, in a voice that resonated not through the ears, but through the soul. "We remember the first. We remember the fall. You come now bearing his mark. You are known, and you will be consumed." Selene's blood ran cold. It knew Kaelor. It had seen him before, and now it was coming for him. Kaelor believed he had become something new, but to the abyss, he was something familiar, something that had come before, something that had already fallen. The First Collapse was waking. Selene Draeven's fleet scrambled to escape, but the abyss had already marked them. Nothing left this place unchanged. The moment they had been seen, they had become part of it. "Initiate jump now," Selene barked. "We can't," an officer shouted. "Something is interfering with our drive. It's holding us here." Outside, the abyss rippled. The vast, shifting structure at its core pulsed, its tendrils of dark energy stretching toward them like roots digging into the universe itself. Then in an instant, the Ebon horizon was no longer just in space, it was somewhere else. Selene staggered as reality fractured around her. The bridge flickered, her crew flickered. One moment she was aboard her ship, the next she was standing in the ruins of Zelthor, then on a nameless world swallowed by fire, then in the depths of a dead star. Then silence. She stood alone. The abyss had stripped everything away, and before her, in the endless dark, a figure stood waiting. It was not a being, not flesh, not energy. It was a void in the shape of something once great. Its form wavered, as if it was struggling to exist, or refusing to be remembered. Then the voice came, "You bear his shadow." Selene's chest tightened. "Kaelor." The entity did not move. "We saw the first, we consumed the first, and yet it returns." Selene felt something alien press against her mind, memories not her own, visions of another war, another being, like Kaelor, who had once stood where he now stood, a conqueror who had reached too far, who had tried to take what was never meant to be his, and the abyss had unmade him. "It will happen again." Selene gasped as the vision shattered. She was back on the bridge of the Ebon horizon, her crew shouting, the fleet still trapped. But now she understood. Kaelor thought he had ascended, but whatever he had become, he was not the first. And the abyss had come to finish what it started. Kaelor had left mortality behind, but what awaited him was not godhood. It was a debt long overdue. The abyss surged. Across the galaxy, something shifted, a presence so vast, so ancient, that it had no single name. It had been waiting, watching, remembering, and now it had seen enough, beyond reality. Kaelor stood before the cosmic rift, his golden gaze fixed on the swirling void beyond existence. His power had reshaped stars, rewritten time, but here, something pushed back. He felt it. Something was coming for him. The whispers of the abyss wrapped around him like a suffocating tide, voices without mouths, speaking in truths he had never sought. "You wear the shape of the first. You walk his path, and now you will share his fate." Kaelor's fingers clenched into a fist, reality bending at his will. "I do not walk in anyone's shadow." The void laughed. "You are not the first to say those words." Then the universe trembled. From the abyss, something emerged. It had no true form, no face, yet Kaelor knew. It was here for him. A force that had undone beings like him before. A force that would not kneel. The abyss reached for him. Kaelor raised his hands, and for the first time his will was not absolute. The abyss fought back. Stars flickered. Time cracked. And Kaelor felt something impossible, resistance. The very power he had taken was being unraveled. He gritted his teeth. "No!" The abyss pulled. Kaelor staggered. For the first time since his ascension, he felt small. The universe itself had rejected him. Aboard the Ebon horizon, Selene Draeven's fleet finally broke free. The abyss released them, its hunger now focused on one thing alone. Kaelor. Selene exhaled sharply. "We need to move. Now." "Admiral," a technician whispered, what if it takes him?" Selene turned toward the abyss, where Kaelor's glowing form fought against the void itself. She tightened her jaw. "Then we pray that it does." The end or the beginning? Kaelor thought he had escaped the limits of the universe, but some forces don't let go. They pull you back. Subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications, because reality itself is about to be rewritten. And remember, even gods can be unmade.